federal agents never just stumble into local eateries on a whim. They certainly avoid blindly storming a century-old Mexican dining staple in Tucson. Arizona claims this oldest family-run Mexican joint in the nation. Authorities only start grilling staff about a television crew when they possess critical insider knowledge. The exact nature of their interrogation drives the entire focus of this breakdown. That truth reveals far more than merely a simple dining location. It highlights a chilling theory regarding how Nancy Guthrie became a target. Should detectives prove correct, El Charro Cafe marks the exact genesis of this nightmare. We must begin by separating hard facts from the swirling cloud of uncertainty. This narrative conceals a massive complication that mainstream media has completely ignored. NewsNation reporter Brian Anton remains one of the rare journalists staying consistently ahead of this investigation. On his March 11, 2026 investigative broadcast, he firmly stated that federal agents visited a Tucson Mexican eatery to thoroughly interrogate the staff. Crucially, Anton kept the specific establishment totally anonymous. He merely explained that detectives retraced steps across several spots Savannah and Nancy toured during their two-day television production. This included the Mexican diner. Sources informed him federal agents dropped by to grill the staff with pointed inquiries. Internet sleuths later identified El Charro Cafe via their own social media posts. Ownership had previously uploaded footage showing the Today Show broadcasting from their floor, a fact quickly verified by numerous other news publications. Quote, El Charro stands as America's oldest family-run Mexican joint, making it the ideal spot to reconnect with my mother, Nancy, and sister Annie. Quote, whenever I travel back home to Tucson, stopping by El Charro becomes an absolute necessity. Quote, how long has El Charro existed here? 103 years. Carlo Flores managed El Charro for over 50 years after succeeding her great-aunt Monica. The legendary culinary pioneer, widely credited with inventing the chimichanga, she introduced us to a Prohibition-era custom where card-playing ladies cleverly disguised their tequila shots inside innocent little teacups. Quote, cheers, I love you. Quote, don't chug the entire glass. Now things get genuinely messy, especially with the Arizona Daily Star, a local Tucson publication fielding active ground journalists. They interviewed Ray Flores, head of Flores Concepts and C. Charro. As the parent organization running El Charro, he firmly stated that absolutely zero law enforcement officials ever reached out to their establishment. He firmly stated we gladly would have cooperated, yet they never phoned us. Meanwhile, following standard protocol, the Bureau flatly refused to comment on their active, ongoing investigation. So here lies the core conflict. A highly respected reporter claims federal agents grilled the staff, while the venue's own upper management strongly denies it. Management claims total ignorance of any visit. Logically, both conflicting narratives simply cannot exist as the absolute truth. Either Anton's informants uncovered an undercover operation bypassing corporate brass, or a massive, unexplained communication breakdown occurred somewhere along the chain of command. We aren't here to play referee in this dispute. However, dwelling on this glaring contradiction feels necessary. It reveals critical, underlying truths about the current trajectory of this sprawling criminal investigation. When a bulletproof journalist like Anton reports federal agents asking targeted behavioral questions, yet corporate bosses swear they never heard a peep, something is amiss. Only a handful of logical possibilities remain true. Either his insiders received bad intel, or authorities intentionally bypassed executives to speak directly with individuals. Perhaps the agents conducted their interviews so discreetly that the parent company's president remained completely oblivious to the entire operation. Maybe Ali routed intelligence through alternative police networks via an undisclosed third party. Handling such a massive, high-profile case with countless agencies running parallel investigations simultaneously creates extreme complexities. Therefore, that backdoor theory hardly seems far-fetched. Federal investigators rarely storm the front lobby to politely introduce themselves to the general manager. Ultimately, Anton's explosive reporting serves as the fundamental bedrock for the investigative theories we are breaking down right now. The exact phrasing of those alleged agent inquiries forms the beating heart of this mystery. Regardless of whether that visit occurred exactly as detailed, those specific inquiries expose a profoundly real, hyper-focused detective theory. According to his insiders, Agents directly interrogated the El Charro staff. Quote, "Did anybody appear sketchy while Savannah filmed alongside her mother? Did any random patron aggressively demand photos or suddenly lose their temper? Quote, did some creep loiter around longer than necessary? Seriously. Analyze that interrogation again. You don't ask that just to politely tie up loose ends. Cops avoid asking those things just to satisfy a boring procedural checklist. Detectives only drop those specific bombs when harboring a solid working theory. They hold a coherent, evidence-driven belief that a dangerous suspect occupied that exact location on that specific afternoon, quietly watching his prey. The Bureau, or at least the lead detectives running this manhunt, actively hunted for a stalker lurking inside that diner. Stop right there before unpacking the hidden truth behind those inquiries. We must trace back to the exact trigger that blasted El Charro onto the police radar. Listen closely. Everything links back to one fateful autumn afternoon in 2025, just over 3 months prior to Nancy Guthrie vanishing without a trace. A major network television crew hit Tucson. They unloaded their heavy broadcasting gear straight into a highly cherished local establishment, capturing a massive spectacle that a huge global audience would ultimately witness. Fast forward to October 17th, 2025. Savannah Guthrie headed back to her hometown for a unique broadcast named Homecoming Today, featuring morning hosts revisiting their foundational roots. Production spanned roughly 8 hours across various urban spots, kicking off right at the crack of dawn inside Saguaro National Park. The production team shifted toward the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum next, finally hitting El Charro for a midday family meal. Things wrapped up over at her former college campus, the University of Arizona, featuring a grand reception from the school leader, alongside a lively marching band and her former sorority sisters, creating an intimate stop. However, the truly critical location for our mystery remains El Charro, featuring an appearance alongside 2 close family members. That specific clip broadcasted nationally on November 5th, 2025. The vibe felt incredibly cozy, nostalgic, and intimate. A beautiful tribute praising the hometown through the perspective of a local kid who kept her roots firmly planted in the soil. Right inside El Charro Cafe, Savannah grabbed a seat alongside her mom, Nancy Guthrie, and her sibling, Annie Guthrie. For quite a few moments on massive network television, Nancy Guthrie sat prominently displayed inside El Charro. The beloved mother fielded her child's interview prompts directly on film. She revealed to Savannah, and honestly the entire globe, her deep adoration for Tucson. "It is truly spectacular," Nancy gushed. "The breeze, the easygoing lifestyle, everything feels completely relaxed and peaceful." Chuckling about wild javelinas devouring her garden, she remained incredibly exposed. She became instantly recognizable. "Mother, your crew arrived back in the 70s after constantly bouncing from place to place. Why did you ultimately choose Tucson to settle down and build a lasting foundation? It is incredible. The atmosphere and daily lifestyle remain remarkably chill and sweet. Plus, observing the wild javelinas munching on my greenery brings me total joy. Yet the greatest perk of Tucson involves returning home to your faces. Care to toast? Grab a prickly pear margarita. Bottoms up. Clink. I simply adore you. Love you immensely. Between my cherished relatives and gorgeous local landscapes, I remain a proud child of these arid lands forever." Essentially, she got formally presented to countless random viewers as Savannah's beloved mom, painted as an 84-year-old local resident possessing direct ties to an absolute titan of daytime broadcasting in the United States. Consider the chilling implications of that exposure if a predator was actively hunting her down. This broadcast was hardly hidden. It dominated major online video platforms and got endlessly chopped up for viral social media circulation. Local press actually published reports detailing the production long before the episode ever dropped. The Tucson Daily Star continuously documented the big October 17th homecoming as it happened, reporting how network producers shot footage across university grounds and iconic neighborhood spots. People definitely anticipated this content way before it hit mainstream cable feeds. Following Nancy vanishing into thin air on February 1st, 2026. That specific video exploded online, heavily scrutinized by concerned citizens attempting to fathom how such tragedy strikes a high-profile household. Viewers replaying the tape today sense pure dread behind every frame, especially while Nancy praises her relaxed desert existence, or when Savannah questions her mother's loyalty to the town. A standard weekday family meal now carries an incredibly sinister underlying tone. Detectives currently want to know if a particular individual caught wind of this project on October 17th, perhaps lurking outside the eatery during production, or plotting their move immediately following the massive November 5th nationwide broadcast premiere. Grab your seat, because this particular clue completely flips the script. Law enforcement aggressively sought security tapes from residents surrounding the Catalina Foothills property starting January 1st, 2026. An entire month prior to the kidnapping, authorities strongly zeroed in on two very particular dates, January 11th and January 24th. Several locals verified to major news networks and Brian Anton that cops knocked on their doors inquiring specifically about those timeframes. A resident informed reporters that detectives heavily interrogated her regarding any video evidence from January 24th, mere days before the tragedy. The broader community sweep, though, extended all the way back to the new year. This move reveals an absolutely crucial element regarding how the police view this unfolding mystery. Authorities refuse to believe this was just a random freak occurrence committed by a spontaneous stranger passing by. Cops are actively hunting a calculated predator who painted a bullseye on her back long before showing up at her door. Make no mistake, whoever lurked around her Catalina Foothills property in early January had a chilling, specific mission in mind. Location plays a massive role here, because nobody just randomly wanders into the Catalina Foothills by coincidence. Tucked away north of Tucson, this exclusive residential zone is strictly a destination you visit with a clear objective. So, an unidentified figure showing up there on January 11th and likely returning on the 24th knew the way. They were absolutely not taking a detour, but targeting Nancy Guthrie's exact address, meaning they gathered that intel somehow. This brings us to the El Charro connection, where cameras rolled on October 17th before airing on November 5th. Assuming detectives are correct, the perpetrator was already scoping out her residence by the 11th of January at the latest. A deeply disturbing yet perfectly logical theory bridges these two events, and law enforcement is clearly treating this with absolute gravity. Did this predator initially lock onto Nancy Guthrie while watching that exact morning show feature? Perhaps they spotted her during the autumn shoot, or caught the national television broadcast, and instantly hatched a sinister plot. That implies the cold weeks spanning late fall to early winter served as a chilling preparation period, escalating from sight to strike. Answering that chilling theory is the exact reason investigators are hyper-focused on El Charro. Authorities managed to confirm another terrifying detail after reviewing extensive security footage. Video recovered from the perimeter of her house shows unknown figures trespassing onto the grounds a minimum of 2 times prior to the kidnapping. They uncovered 2 terrifying images taken on distinct, separate days. This prowler repeatedly visited the location, proving this was never an impulsive crime of opportunity thought up at the last second. We are looking at a highly premeditated scheme, leaving federal agents desperately trying to pinpoint exactly when the obsession began. Suppose the spark ignited at El Charro, with a bystander lurking around the cafe on October 17th, watching the crew record Nancy. That specific autumn afternoon would mark the tragic turning point where an ordinary citizen unwittingly became prey. We need to pause and examine the restaurant's background, since the setting carries far more significance than you might guess. Monica Flynn originally launched El Charro Cafe right in Tucson back in 1922. This historic spot stands as America's longest-running Mexican eatery kept entirely within one bloodline, thriving for over 100 years. The current head cook and great niece of the founder, Carlota Flores, openly discussed her relationship with the victims following the tragedy. She offered the New York Post a beautifully intimate, heartfelt description of the missing matriarch. The chef praised the clan extensively, noting that interacting with Nancy simply felt like being wrapped in a warm hug from your own grandma. She came across as an incredibly grounded mother, fiercely devoted to her kids, and wishing for nothing but their absolute happiness. Her only distinguishing factor was having a famous child in the public eye, a seemingly innocent comment that now carries a terrifying weight. Being the mother of a major celebrity wasn't just a fun fact. It was likely the exact reason the kidnappers zeroed in on her initially. appearing on a nationwide network essentially exposed her location, showing viewers exactly where she loved to eat in her hometown. This sudden burst of exposure completely shattered the protective anonymity an 84-year-old senior citizen would normally enjoy. Consider the cultural footprint this establishment holds in the community, because this is definitely no hidden gem kept secret by locals. The venue is a literal historic monument that has magnetized vacationers and media productions alike for over 100 years. A place this popular constantly swarms with large crowds, practically guaranteeing a massive audience whenever a renowned journalist films. The local population holds immense pride for this restaurant, revering it as an indestructible pillar of their shared community history. These rare venues physically embody the spirit of the town itself, especially when a high-profile host praises them on the airwaves. She enthusiastically called it the nation's longest-running family, Mexican joint, and her absolute favorite spot to reconnect with relatives. She was doing way more than reviewing food. She was essentially giving out a precise location pin. By putting her relatives at such a recognizable public hotspot, she gave every single viewer an exact location they could look up in 30 seconds. She mentioned making it a mandatory stop during every hometown visit, openly discussing the building's impressive age on camera. At 100 years old, management clarified that the October 17th recording happened inside an isolated room away from regular guests. However, the actual business continued operating normally that afternoon, serving a lunchtime crowd of roughly 50 everyday diners. Having a massive television production team setting up gear inside such an iconic local hotspot certainly did not go unnoticed by anyone. Word spread like wildfire among the patrons and pedestrians nearby, creating a massive buzz throughout the entire surrounding community. Even the local newspapers actively reported on the big event. This leaves detectives wondering who was watching too closely, asking the public if they noticed anyone loitering or covertly snapping photos. Was there an explosive outburst? Or maybe subtle warning signs? Detectives basically painted a picture of a bystander whose fixation totally crossed the line into dangerous obsession. An individual totally ignoring the flashy TV crew and the celebrity host, or the whole media circus happening around them. Instead, this stalker locked their eyes completely on the mother across the booth, Nancy Guthrie. We must fully unpack this stalking angle, as the detective work focusing on El Charro connects to a much bigger puzzle. It forms merely a single fragment of the timeline they began piecing together on February 1st. While past chapters broke down the home security videos and the door-to-door interviews, this right here remains the absolute most crucial takeaway regarding this particular theory. Authorities thoroughly reviewed security clips and interviewed locals, checking activities dating back to January 1st, 2026, which was 30 entire days prior to her vanishing. Detectives pointedly questioned locals regarding January 11th and January 24th. The underlying message is obvious. An unknown person lurked around that area, likely stalking her property on those specific days. Cops strongly suspect this individual was there on purpose. That completely ruins the idea of a random, spur-of-the-moment crime, lurking around the block 21 days ahead of the kidnapping, maybe repeatedly. Screams of tactical scouting and victim verification, displaying an incredibly calculated, chilling routine that demands a deeply rooted motive. That Ring video dropped on February 10th, capturing a disguised, gun-toting intruder at her doorway early on February 1st, solidifies his deadly intent. The guy arrived ready, face covered, hands wrapped in gloves, and hauling a 25-liter bag. He even spotted the lens and attempted to disable it. The entire operation was strictly premeditated. Consequently, detectives have entirely stopped wondering if he winged it. All the clues confirm his orchestration. Now, authorities just desperately need to figure out when his obsession started and exactly how he first noticed Nancy. The El Charro lead hints this dark fixation might originate from October 2025. Assuming this checks out, we are basically dealing with a predator who spotted a lady on a huge network broadcast, tracked down her identity, pinpointed her exact hometown, linked her up with a certain friend group, and finalized his sinister plan. Months down the road, he traveled to Tucson just to observe. Eventually, as the evening of January 31st bled into the pre-dawn hours of February 1st, the stalker returned for his final strike. Brian Anton's March 11th dispatch demands intense scrutiny. both for its shocking disclosures and how carefully we must analyze the facts. That reporter practically served as the absolute gold standard for factual updates since this nightmare kicked off. Every single scoop he delivered regarding the Guthrie mystery stayed wildly accurate, and his insiders always proved trustworthy. Whenever he drops a headline, you better pay close attention. Here is his latest bombshell. Detectives revisited multiple venues that hosted the morning program's camera crews during the prior autumn, notably referencing that particular Mexican eatery. He informed viewers that his contacts confirmed federal agents swept the joint, digging into potential clues linked to that specific broadcast. He added that officers interrogated the workers, asking, "Did you notice any creeps lurking around while Savannah filmed? Were fans aggressively demanding selfies? Did any patrons suddenly lose their temper? Did some weirdo stay way past their welcome?" However, at this exact juncture, we must balance a pair of conflicting truths. His exclusive intel flows strictly from anonymous informants, bypassing the bistro's actual owners and the feds, who totally refused to speak. Meanwhile, local journalists over at the daily paper did some heavy lifting in town and successfully contacted Ray Flores, the top executive running the franchise, and he bluntly denied any federal visits. "We definitely would have cooperated with agents," he insisted, adding, "but the phone never rang." So we have a massive contradiction in the media narrative that remains a total mystery. Still, that doesn't automatically mean his tipsters lied. Undercover operations can easily probe a business in dozens of ways without ever alerting the head honchos. Plainclothes cops, casually questioning bartenders, or utilizing completely anonymous go-betweens, maneuvers that a corporate CEO would remain totally oblivious about. Though the glaring discrepancy still carries massive weight here. We simply cannot treat this federal visit as gospel while the establishment's owners vehemently deny it. However, we can confidently state one undeniable fact: the intense grilling his sources outlined, regardless of the exact timing, exposes a legitimate police hypothesis. The terrifying premise that a stalker locked onto Nancy on October 17th, a dark suspicion that this daytime television taping served as the exact catalyst, putting her right in the crosshairs of her future kidnapper. That chilling hypothesis currently fuels this entire criminal manhunt. An incredibly crucial detail about that restaurant scene involves the other dinner guests. Considering the booth held more than just the mother-daughter duo, the victim's other child, Annie, actually joined them for the duration of the shoot, grabbing a seat and actively participating in that televised lunch. Millions of viewers watched her sitting right beside her mom. Let us be absolutely clear from our past reports. Annie Guthrie and her spouse, Tommaso Chion, keep popping up on the investigative radar. Nobody thinks they committed a crime. Yet the evidence trail keeps overlapping with their daily routines. Keon literally stands as the final individual to lay eyes on Nancy prior to her disappearance. After driving her to the Catalina Foothills residence around 9:50 on the night of January 31st, authorities eventually ruled the relatives out as suspects. However, Annie being spotted at El Charro remains a massive puzzle piece for the stalking hypothesis, especially if the culprit watched that Today Show broadcast. Whether they lurked nearby on October 17th or caught the November airing, they absorbed far more than just a glimpse of Nancy Guthrie. The entire family dynamic was on display, featuring the renowned anchor Savannah, the matriarch Nancy, and her sister Annie. Anyone watching got a front row seat to their intimate family gatherings, observing their inner circle, their public interactions, and their deep emotional bonds. To a predator trying to map out a victim without actually knowing them, this was an absolute goldmine of intelligence. That footage mapped out her closest relationships while perfectly illustrating her everyday social habits. It painted a vivid picture of how she spent her evenings and explicitly revealed who usually accompanied her. Without meaning to, that television spot served as an intimate documentary of the Guthrie clan living their regular lives in Tucson. Sadly, a watcher with malicious motives took notes on everything, leading detectives to constantly circle back to one agonizing core question. Was the person who snatched Nancy Guthrie actually a familiar face from her personal life? The theory that an insider pulled this off made perfect sense early on, largely due to the highly specific circumstances surrounding the kidnapping. They struck at the perfect moment, seemingly tracked her daily habits, bypassed security measures, and navigated the floor plan effortlessly. Nothing about this crime screams random opportunity. Yet digging into the El Charo connection flips the whole insider concept on its head. Suddenly, the perpetrator did not necessarily need a formal introduction, meaning a classic inside job might not be the real scenario. Gathering tactical data on a target no longer demands an actual friendship or acquaintance. This is especially true today, with sprawling social media networks and nationwide morning broadcasts practically handing out blueprints. Celebrities and their relatives constantly broadcast their personal worlds, and Savannah Guthrie stands out as a highly recognizable American journalist. She openly embraces her Tucson heritage as a core aspect of her brand, intentionally highlighting it during a special hometown trip. Cameras followed her into a beloved local diner to broadcast a cozy meal with her aging mother and sibling for the whole country to watch. Fans absolutely eat up that kind of wholesome content, making it the exact material television producers strive to deliver. However, if a dangerous stalker happens to tune in, they treat that same sweet footage like a tactical dossier. That nationwide broadcast served as a masterclass in stalking, revealing the 84-year-old resided in Tucson while clearly showing her face. Viewers learned her favorite dining spots, discovered the identity of her high-profile daughter, and understood their strong bond. Those 6 minutes of heartwarming programming handed strangers enough intimate clues to feel incredibly close to someone they had never actually met. Assuming law enforcement is currently following this exact playbook, the implications are chilling. A total unknown might have compiled a dossier from public media, scouted the area in person, turning El Charo into far more than a simple eatery. That diner potentially represents ground zero, marking the exact second a casual viewer evolved into a focused predator fixated on Nancy Guthrie. Should that theory hold water, the path leading directly from El Charo to the tragedy on February 1st is absolutely no accident. Instead, it forms a terrifying timeline, especially since detectives initially ignored the restaurant immediately following her vanishing. We genuinely need to stop and think about that detail for a moment. When a prominent figure goes missing, cops usually secure the immediate perimeter, aggressively questioning locals and grabbing nearby camera footage. Authorities typically retrace the victim's final steps, slowly widening their search radius outward from the initial crime scene. El Charo sits nowhere near the Catalina Foothills property, completely outside her usual residential bubble. Detectives would never casually stumble upon that cafe during a routine neighborhood sweep, meaning their sudden focus on it was deliberate. Probing staff about weird customer behavior from October 17th proves the task force utilized deep analytical profiling to get there. They essentially reverse-engineered her entire media presence, zeroed in on that Today Show broadcast, and started asking the hard questions. What if the kidnapper originally spotted their target strictly through television screens? When was the absolute last time cameras caught her hanging out at an identifiable, specific spot in Tucson? That specific date happens to be October 17th, 2025, right inside the El Charo Cafe. It barely matters if agents marched into the dining room or interviewed the waitstaff over the phone. The sheer reality that these inquiries occurred at all proves detectives have drastically shifted their timeline backward to catch a ghost. Detectives are hunting down the absolute spark that ignited this entire terrifying nightmare, right now. That elusive starting point currently leads detectives toward a century-old tavern dining space during a quiet Tuesday afternoon in October. Just as television producers prepared their broadcast gear, families gathered to eat, and a nearby stranger focused completely on a vulnerable target. We need to tackle the headline up front, since dedicated viewers tracking this mystery have earned complete transparency. Have we finally struck gold? People toss around that particular phrase way too casually during massive public manhunts. True progress genuinely implies that detectives leaped from total darkness into a clearly illuminated phase of genuine understanding, meaning the hazy details finally crystallized, unlocking a promising new investigative avenue. Under those strict terms, matters remain unverified and potentially messier than early news stories claimed. Here are the absolute facts. Reporter Brian Enton, a trusted journalist, reported on March 11th, 2026, that detectives grilled local bistro workers about suspicious actions during that autumn morning broadcast, probing for weird mannerisms. Random picture-taking, sudden rage, or loitering reveals a highly focused and calculated law enforcement strategy. However, disputes remain active. The tavern owners completely deny ever speaking with police, leaving a massive factual contradiction open. Here are the undeniable facts. Federal agents aggressively scoured the surrounding blocks for security tapes spanning from January 11th through January 24th, and even reaching back to January 1st. Multiple residential lenses recorded unidentified figures lurking outside the victim's property several days before she vanished. A front porch lens explicitly recorded a weaponized, disguised, covered intruder pacing outside her home during the early morning of February 1st, showing clear tactical preparation. Meanwhile, plenty remains entirely unverified. Authorities haven't officially singled out anyone yet. 0 arrests happened so far, and investigators lack a formal culprit at the time we filmed this update. Still, the deductive reasoning, tying that dining establishment into the overall chronology, feels solid enough to analyze critically. Assuming the perpetrator spotted his target during that autumn production or the subsequent autumn airing, then those 8 to 10 weeks separating their visual contact and his arrival at her house suggest a calculating prep phase, driven by cold logistics rather than random chaos. El Charro, regardless of whether federal cops actually interviewed their staff, remains the possible birthplace of this sinister scheme. We should dissect the psychological weight behind the inquiries the reporter uncovered, considering they serve a very precise purpose. These queries showcase a highly targeted law enforcement mindset, requiring deeper analysis. Asking about unauthorized pictures directly hints at stalking. Predators actively hunting down victims regularly record their prey. They snap shots of faces, physical surroundings, and escape routes. Establishing a photographic log aids their tactical plotting. Any bystander lingering near the bistro on October 17th, snapping pictures of something other than the television stars or production sets, but instead intensely photographing the older woman eating her meal, presents a serious red flag. Such actions trigger massive alarms, prompting detective inquiries several seasons later, since those illicit snapshots likely revealed the exact hometown she resided in, her specific vehicle type, and her precise travel route. After the broadcast ended, queries regarding aggressive outbursts highlight something criminal psychologists label as a toxic ownership reaction. An obsessed predator, suddenly barred from reaching their chosen prey due to physical barriers or the tight security of an exclusive television set, or kept away by aggressive bodyguards and hospitality workers, will frequently erupt with irrational rage that makes absolutely no logical sense. In a world that shares everything instantly, this story reminds us that visibility can become vulnerability. A warm family moment, a familia restaurant, a routine evening. Even a public appearance meant to celebrate love and connection can also reveal patterns to the wrong eyes. That is the heartbreaking lesson here. We must learn that privacy is not paranoia. Protecting personal routines, home details, and family habits is an act of wisdom, especially when it involves elderly loved ones. The content also shows something deeper evil often studies before it strikes. It watches, waits, and gathers small details that most people think are harmless. That is why communities must stay alert, families must communicate, and every unusual detail must be taken seriously. One overlooked clue, one ignored warning, one delayed response can carry devastating consequences. But there is also a powerful human lesson in this tragedy. Love must become action. Caring for our parents and grandparents means more than loving them emotionally. It means protecting them practically, checking on them consistently, and treating their safety as urgent. In the end, this is not only a story about fear, it is a call to be wiser, more watchful, and more responsible with the people we treasure most.